What's going on, everybody? Baird here with Spec of Tech. Welcome to the channel. Today we're going to be talking about the best subwoofer, or at least the biggest and baddest subwoofer that SVS has to offer, and that's the PB17. It's a ported subwoofer with a 17-inch driver and 2800 watts RMS with over 6000 watts peak. It also has the benefit of a very handy app which you can control all of the settings on that subwoofer from your phone. It may have sophisticated tech and look really premium, but don't let that fool you. This thing is a true beast underneath. It has a ton of output to violently shake your room as well. And one thing of note about that 17-inch driver is that it is using two 8-inch voice coils, which really is quite big, even for a 17-inch driver, which keeps things nice and linear to give you clean, tight, accurate bass. If you guys are looking for detailed specs about the PB17, I'll link that video in the top right-hand corner of this video. The PB17 is a large subwoofer, but it doesn't look too big if you look at it from the front. It's not too wide and not too tall, but they do compensate that with depth. Because when you want a subwoofer to have a lot of output, or max SPL, you can't do that without size. There has to be some size there for that to happen. I think that they did a pretty good job kind of mitigating the size of the subwoofer, at least from the front, while still providing you with a ton of output. So of course this is a monster subwoofer with a lot of output, so we did test it on some movies, but I also tested it on some music as well. And guys, keep in mind that I'm just doing this for demos. I don't normally listen to things at that level. It wasn't even really balanced with the speakers, so when I do play the demos for you guys, you are going to hear that the bass is kind of drowning out the rest of the movie to a certain extent, and that's because I turned up the subwoofers, because the whole purpose of this video is to hear the subwoofers. So I did turn them up. It's not exactly balanced, but I just wanted to show the output and the capability of these subwoofers for movies like that. That's, if you want, you're going to be able to shake your room so violently. When I was watching that infamous tank scene in Fury, where the tanks are shooting back and forth and there's machine gun fire back and forth, I was standing back behind my chair so I could record the subwoofers, and I could feel the air from those ports blowing me in the face from behind my chairs. I didn't hear any port noise during the movie, so that's something to note here. Not to say that these PB17s don't have some port noise, they do. So if you're playing low frequencies and that's all you're playing, then you are going to hear some port noise with these PB17s. I would say that it is improved over the PB16s, or the previous version, the PB16s, but there is still some port noise there. There is some chuffing, but it is quite a bit better, I would say, than the PB16s. And again, you're only going to hear it if you're playing really low frequencies and there's nothing else going on to drown out that port noise. So if I had to grade the port noise, I would say that it's on the lower end, or at least the quieter end of port noise. With any ported subwoofer, you're always going to get a little bit of port noise. It's inevitable. There's air moving in and out of that port, so there's always going to be some. So if you're playing ultra low frequencies and there's just no other sounds happening, you are going to hear that port. That's one of the downsides to a ported subwoofer. A sealed subwoofer, you're not going to have to deal with that, but typically with a sealed subwoofer, you're sacrificing output for that smaller footprint and no ports. So in this case, yes, you do have some port noise, but I would say that it's on the quieter side of things when it comes to ported subwoofers. There's worse out there. There are some that are slightly better, but these aren't too bad. They're definitely better and an improvement over the PB16s. It does have 3 4-inch ports on the front, which typically, if you do have a front ported subwoofer, it does make it a little bit easier to hear the port noise because it's right there in the front versus having like a slot port or the ports on the back, which does help drown out the port noise a little bit. But again, it's not excessive here, it's not overbearing, but if you are playing a lot of low frequencies with not a lot of other sounds going on, you are going to hear it. But when I was playing movies like Fury and another one, Interstellar, port noise was not an issue because there's so much other things going on and other sounds going on with these movies. You're not going to hear the ports. And when I was playing Interstellar, I played the wormhole scene. My whole room was excited. Everything was shaking. I could feel my clothes shaking. I could feel it in my chest. I could feel my chair shaking. The PB17s really do put out a ton of output, which I'm going to show you guys in a minute with the REW measurements. But the PB17s, there's no way around it. They really do perform. And it's not just a lot of output, but it is good, clean output as well. Let's have a quick look at some of the movie demos here, and then we're going to talk about these subwoofers for music. So as with any demos over YouTube, guys, my recording equipment, my room, as well as the device that you're listening on is going to greatly affect the sound. So don't take this as an accurate depiction of what I was hearing in my room, but I know that there's a lot of you guys out there that do like the sound demos and you prefer the sound demos. So here you go.
right, 18, 20 left.
Everybody ready to say goodbye to our solar system?
So as you can see, these drivers really can get moving if you push things. Obviously for these demos, I did have things cranked up to 11. So if you hear my room shaking, that's why. It's not normal for my room to shake that violently. But for demos like this, I do like to turn things up a little bit too much. So if you are looking for these subwoofers for movies, I absolutely recommend them. If they're within your budget, they are currently $3,000 US or 5,250 Canadian dollars at the time of this recording. So they're not an inexpensive subwoofer, but what you are getting is a ton of output with sophisticated DSP and a sophisticated app, along with really premium looks with that gloss black finish. But if you don't like gloss black, you can also get a real wood veneer black oak finish as well. And when it comes to music, these subwoofers perform very well again. Like I said earlier, they do have clean, tight, accurate bass, which of course is what you want for music. I did do some music demos with these subwoofers as well. Now, of course, you do have different modes with these subwoofers. You can run them in sealed mode, extended mode, or standard mode, which we are going to talk about in a minute with the REW measurements. I know that there are some out there that prefer a sealed subwoofer when it comes to music, but that's what's great about the SVS lines of subwoofers. A lot of them, you can plug the ports below with the included port bungs and then change the subwoofer into sealed mode, which really does make it versatile for music and movies, because I know there are a lot of you out there that think that sealed are much better for music. So in this case, you can run this in a sealed mode. And then if you want to watch movies afterwards, you simply take the port bungs out, change it to extended mode using the app, which is very simple and very quick to do. And then you can use extended mode for movies. But during my testing for music, I listened to songs like Billie Eilish's NDA. I like that song because it has a nice hard-hitting thumpy bass to it. Another song that I like to use is Kill Shot by Eminem, simply because it does have a little bit of that hard-hitting thumpy bass, as well as some very low-end bass, which approaches probably the 20 hertz range somewhere in there. I'm not sure exactly, but it has some nice low rumble as well as some hard-hitting thump. And these subwoofers didn't miss a beat with either one of those songs. I also played some bass demo songs as well from Tidal that just has a variety of different frequencies of bass to show you how your subwoofers are performing with different frequencies, and it does switch between them fairly quickly to kind of give you an idea of the transience of the subwoofer. And again, these PB17s did not miss a beat. When it came to Billie Eilish's NDA, you just felt that hard-hitting thump in your chest, especially when I was standing in front of my home theater seats and listening to those songs. It was almost too much, like you could just feel it in your bones. And again, with Kill Shot with Eminem, you felt that rumble. I could feel my clothing shaking, and then I could feel that hard-hitting thump in my chest. And then when it came to those bass demos that I mentioned, it just really excited my room. Probably the most out of all the demos that I did, especially I think it was the 20 hertz. It's called the 20 hertz bass demo song. And that one in particular just violently shook my room. These subwoofers really do have a ton of output, especially with two of them in your room. So if you are able to add a second one or even a third or fourth one in your room, you guys, you're not going to need more bass than that. I know that there are subwoofers out there that are going to have more output than these PB17s, but these PB17s are no slouch, which I will show you in a minute with the REW measurements. They are approaching some pretty extreme max SPL numbers. But when it comes to music, that's not really what you're looking for. You're not looking for that max output. What you're looking for is good, clean, tight, accurate bass, and the PB17s do have that as well. I would consider them to be a nice, high-quality, accurate bass. They have some nuance to them. They do have a nice low tone to them, a clean tone to them. There's definitely a difference when you're listening to like a really low-budget subwoofer versus something like this that's a bit more expensive, but it's also more premium. There is a bit of a difference in sound quality. You can hear that this has a very clean, low distortion sound to it, has a nice quality bass to it with some nuance, whereas a very inexpensive low budget subwoofer, sure, you are going to get some shake out of it, you're going to get some bass out of it, but it doesn't sound quite the same as when you're spending money like you are spending on these PB17s. You are going to get more quality bass. So when it comes to the sound quality in general for movies or music, I really have no complaints about these PB17s, but let's have a listen to some music demos before we move on. I hope you guys did enjoy those demos, and keep in mind that I do crank things up to 11 for demos just to show the performance of the subwoofers. And to crank things up, you can use the display on the back of the amplifier, so you do have full functionality on that OLED display. You can change all of the settings within the subwoofer on that back display. But the problem with the display is, in most cases, or at least in a lot of cases, the subwoofer is going to be pushed up with the back or the amplifier side pushed up against the wall like it is in my case. So you're not going to have easy access to that display to change the settings. So SVS solved that problem by providing the SVS Subwoofer app, which is an incredibly handy tool. So let's have a look at all of the settings that you can change within that app. So when you first open the app, you do get this home screen. You can see the SVS logo in the top left-hand corner. And then if you press this arrow in the top middle, then if you have other subwoofers, you're going to be able to select which subwoofer that you want to connect to. In this case, I'm connected to my right PB17. The other PB17 is turned off right now, so we're only showing the right PB17. But this is where you would select a different subwoofer if you did have multiple subwoofers connected to the app. And on the main screen, of course, you can adjust the gain. So here I have it set to -5 dB. And then you can change your presets here from movie, music, custom, and default. And then below that, you have your other options. You can select home volume, low pass filter, phase, polarity, parametric EQ, room gain compensation, port tuning, presets, system settings. You can contact SVS support. There's a tutorial, or you can visit the SVS website. So as you can see, there's quite a few different options there. And below that, you can also just click the contact SVS support button. But in the top right-hand corner, you have the exact same options if you press those 3 lines with the 3 dots. So again, you have the exact same options. So on your low pass filter, this is where you can turn your low pass filter on or off, and then you can adjust the low pass filter using the sliding bar, or just press the arrows if you want to change 1 hertz at a time. And then down below that, you have your slope. You can choose 6 dB, 12 dB, 18, or 24. But I don't use the low pass filter, so let's just turn that off, and that makes it so that the subwoofer has LFE mode active. And then below that, you have phase. So here's where you can adjust your phase by 1 degree increments. So I just leave that at 0 because that's what works best for me. Polarity, here you can just have it as positive, negative, so automatically switch the polarity. Then we have parametric EQ. So here's where you can change your parametric EQs. You can have up to 6 parametric EQs. On the right-hand side, you have the toggle switch to turn them on or off. Right now I have them off. I don't use the parametric EQs. If you have room calibration in your processor AVR, I would suggest just leaving this off and using the room calibration to adjust that. Okay, so for a quick explanation on PEQ, so let's say PEQ1, let's pretend that I had a peak at 32 hertz, which I really do in my room. I have a peak at 32 hertz. So then I'm going to want to change this frequency response, or the frequency, to 32 hertz. So in this case, because it is a peak, I'm going to want to reduce the SPL. So I'd do negative boost, however much I would need in that frequency. As you can see, the orange line, that's basically the effect that it's going to have. And it's on a broad frequency, as you can see, but that's because the Q factor is set to 1. But as you turn that down, you can see that it affects it less and less and less. So that's what Q factor does. It basically adjusts the amount of frequencies that this PEQ that you're setting is going to have an effect on. Okay, moving on from there, you have your room compensation. So if you want to use room compensation, you can select which frequency, and then again, you can adjust which slope, 6 dB or 12 dB, but I do not use room gain compensation either. And then below that, you have your port tuning. So in this case, you have 3 different settings. You have standard, extended, and sealed. So in standard mode, you have all ports open. In extended mode, you're going to have 1 port plugged with the included port bungs. And then you're going to have sealed mode, which is all ports plugged. Right now, I have it in standard mode. And then below that, you have your presets. So you have movie, music, and custom. I don't use any presets. I just leave it on none. But I will show you guys in the REW measurement section what the difference is between those presets, as well as the differences in the port tuning. And then you have your system settings, which doesn't have a whole lot here, but you can change the name of the subwoofer if you just click on that and start typing in whatever you want to change it to. I have it labeled as right PB17, but they don't give you a whole lot of characters that you can use, so you have to kind of keep that down to a minimum. And then you can set whether or not you want it on auto standby, always on, or with a trigger. And then you can lock your Bluetooth as well. And then you can reset to factory settings on the bottom left there. And then again, you have contact SVS support and your tutorial, or visit the SVS website. But as you can see, that's quite an extensive app that you can change pretty much everything that you would need to change on this subwoofer. And again, you can do the exact same thing on the display on the back, but I do find this app to be much handier and much more efficient. So I have to admit that having a subwoofer with an app like this is really incredibly handy, especially for a big heavy subwoofer like this, where I have them pushed up against the wall. I just open my phone, open the app, and I can adjust whatever I want quickly and easily. And I've never had any problems with the SVS app. It seems to work every time. But even if you do have issues with either the app or the subwoofer itself, SVS's customer service is one of the best best in the business. You can't take that away from them. They really do have excellent customer service. So if anything ever goes wrong with your subwoofer, have no fear. SVS is going to take care of you. I've actually heard of SVS taking care of their customers even outside of the warranty time frame. So they really do have a customer service that's second to none. And another aspect of this subwoofer that's second to none is the build quality. The gloss black finish on both of my PB17s looks absolutely amazing. It really does have a nice premium look to it. One thing I do wish that they would improve on is their peg and grommet style grills. I would really prefer a magnetic grill, especially in this price range. Not to say that the peg and grommet grill doesn't suit its purpose. It does its job quite well, but I just prefer something like a magnetic grill because it's much easier or quicker, more efficient to take it on and off. And I think at this price point, they should be including it, but you guys know me, I like magnetic grills on pretty much everything that I have. But other than that, I have zero complaints about the build quality of the cabinet, zero complaints about the build quality on the driver or the amplifier. It looks very premium. If you look on the back, it's kind of a clean look. You have your RCA inputs and outputs, you have your XLR inputs and outputs, and then you just have a few buttons to deal with the OLED display if you want to change the settings from the amplifier itself, but it looks very clean and it looks very premium. And then you have that signature SVS driver look, which is a glass fiber laminated dust cap, which again looks very premium. It has a nice look to it. And SVS really is known for building some pretty robust drivers, and in this case, this is their most robust driver that they've ever built. It's big, it's beefy, and it sure does put out a ton of output. And speaking of output, let's finally have a look at the REW measurements, or the Room EQ Wizard measurements that I took of this subwoofer in my room. I know that there's a lot of you out there that are curious to how these subwoofers measure. Unfortunately, I'm not able to do CEA 2010 numbers. What I can show you guys though is how they perform in my room. So I took measurements of just the single subwoofer in the front right hand corner of my room. So in the future, I will be comparing those numbers to some of the other subwoofers that I've measured in that exact same location in my room. But for today, I'm just going to show you guys what it looks like in standard mode, extended mode, and sealed mode, as well as some of the other presets like movie and music, just to show you the different frequency response and how much output these monster subwoofers can put out in my room. Let's hop over onto my computer and have a look at these REW measurements. A lot of these measurements are with one subwoofer in the front right hand corner of my room. I did do measurements with both of these subwoofers, but most of these are just with the one subwoofer, so you get an idea of how one is performing. And there's absolutely zero calibration. There's no effort to mitigate the frequency response or mitigate the nulls in the frequency response. So all these nulls and peaks, keep in mind that this is my room, okay? So there's no room calibration to flatten the line out. This is just the raw output of the subwoofer interacting with my room. So don't pay too much attention to the peaks and the nulls. What we want to look at is kind of the overall output and the frequency response within my room. All right, so starting off with this subwoofer in standard mode, in the front right hand corner of my room, this is the frequency response. You can see that after 20 hertz, it does roll off pretty significantly or pretty steep. And then in extended mode, you do get a bump in the low end, so it's a lot flatter down to probably about 14 hertz or so. And then it does roll off, but not quite as steep as in standard mode. And then you do get pretty much the same frequency response above 20 hertz. And then in sealed mode, you do get a flatter response down to probably about 10 hertz here, or even a little bit lower than 10 hertz. But you can see that it's at the sacrifice of the frequency response between about 13 hertz and 25.5 hertz. And I will show you guys the compression testing of this subwoofer in sealed mode, extended mode, and standard mode. But that just kind of shows you the different modes and what their frequency response looks like, at least in my room. And then you also have different presets as well. So you have a movie preset, and then you have a default preset, which looked pretty much exactly the same. There's no difference there between those presets. But then you also have a music preset, which, as you can see, it's pretty much exactly the same below 31.5 hertz, and then you do get a little bit more of a bump in the higher frequency range, up to about 87 hertz or so. So basically for music, you're just getting a little bit more of that chest thumpy or that hard hitting bass frequency range, or what most would consider to be in that frequency range. All right, so that gives you an idea of the presets and the different modes. Now let's have a look at the compression testing of this subwoofer in standard mode. So this is, again, just one subwoofer in the front right hand corner of my room in the standard mode, which means all the ports are open, and then within the app I have it set to standard mode. So you can see that this top frequency is clearly hitting compression because this line is much closer to this line. So we can remove that one. Now this one here, it does appear to be getting some compression, a little bit more so than this blue line. So we'll remove that one too, just to keep it as fair as possible. That blue line doesn't seem to have any compression. It looks fairly linear across the board versus the line below it. So in standard mode, you're still getting a ton of output here. At 20 hertz, you're looking at 113.7 dB. At 32 hertz, you're looking at 115.4 dB. Over here at 76.6 hertz, 107.55 dB. But after 20 hertz, you can see it rolls off pretty quick. So by 15 hertz, you're at 103, well, basically 104 versus 113. So you're at a 10 dB roll off from 20 hertz to 15 hertz. But this is in standard mode. So let's have a look at this subwoofer in extended and sealed mode. All right, so let's have a look at sealed mode first. So as you can see, instantly at looking at this graph, you are sacrificing quite a bit of output or max XPL to run this in sealed mode. The top green line is very clearly compressing because it's much closer to this orange line, and it should be about a 3 dB gap, and it doesn't have that 3 dB gap. This orange line as well, you can see right here, this gap is much smaller than the gap between here. So again, you're running into compression with this orange line. So our max XPL, or close to it anyway, is going to be this blue line right here. So at 20 hertz in the extended mode, we were at about 113 point something dB. Here we're at 104. And at 32 hertz, we're at 107. But it is much flatter down to about 10 hertz. So if you really care about that infrasonic bass and you want it as flat to, well, pretty much single digits, because you're still pretty flat down to about 9 hertz or so, even though it is rolling off. But you're 98.5 dB at 10 hertz. So if you're looking for the flattest response with the lowest extension, then obviously sealed mode is going to be what you want. And if you have multiples of this subwoofer in your room, then of course you're going to add to this max SPL. So if you want the flattest response with the lowest extension, then sealed mode is going to be what you want. But if you want the most extension, you know what, I'll leave that one up just for now, just to kind of show. So we'll look at the compression testing in extended mode. You can see that you're getting much more SPL. Actually, let's clear this one just for now. So the top line, clearly we're getting compression because it's almost touching the red line below. The red line here, there's much smaller gap between the versus the purple to purple. So that red line, we're also seeing compression. And I'm sure that I marked that down as well. Yes, I marked it as compression. This purple line looks pretty good. There might be a little bit of anomalies, especially when you get down below 10 hertz. You're always going to see a little bit of anomalies, and it's not always going to look perfect because this subwoofer isn't really tuned for that, so it's always going to be a little bit out of whack. You can see here that the gaps aren't always the same. But I would say for the most part that this purple line is not compressing, so we'll keep that one as our max in extended mode. And as you can see at 20 hertz, we're much higher at 111. Let's bring up that sealed one again. So this is the max SPL in sealed mode. So yeah, you do get better output. Actually, you don't even get better output up until 10 hertz. Below 10 hertz, you are getting better output, but is that really what you're looking for? So maybe extended mode would kind of be the best mode if you want a fairly linear response, because if you bring this down, using room calibration, you could bring this line down and it would be a much flatter response. It might actually look better in extended mode than it does in sealed mode, but we'd have to run room calibration for that. The reason I don't show room calibration in my measurements is because everybody's going to have a different AVR, everybody's going to have a different processor with different room calibration. So showing you guys the room calibration doesn't mean a whole lot. Most AVRs and most processors should get this line much flatter than what it is. I just show you guys these measurements to give you a general idea of how it performs, at least in my room, which should give you a general idea of how it performs in your room as far as output goes. But every room is different, keep that in mind. But looking at these two graphs, I would run it in extended mode versus sealed mode. You're getting basically the same output at 10 hertz, but getting much more above it. So at 20 hertz, we're at 111.7 versus 104.5. At 32 hertz, we're at 112.5. versus 107, so quite a bit more output. And guys, this is output you're going to feel absolutely. When I was running these subwoofers and turning up movies like Fury or Interstellar, when I was standing in the middle of my room in front of my chairs, I felt every bit of it in my chest. It was shaking my clothes. shaking my internals, like I could feel it inside my body. This thing does have a ton of output. I can't take that away from SVS here. They've really put out a banger of a sub when it comes to the PB17. Tons of output, and it is a premium looking subwoofer as well. But let's have a look at these versus standard mode. So in standard mode, we chose this blue line, so let's just get rid of all the other lines just to make it a little more simple. So if we have a look at that versus this, that versus this. So again, I would probably choose to run this subwoofer in extended mode. You're still getting a ton of output. So at 32 Hertz, yes, this is at 115, and in extended mode, you're at 112, so you are losing about 3 dB there. And then at 20 Hertz, you're at basically 112 dB. And in standard mode, you're at 113.7, so you're kind of losing 2 dB there. But overall, if you look at the frequency response, you're getting much more output below 20 Hertz and still pretty close to the other output or other frequencies. So if you just keep flipping between these two lines, you can see extended does boost that low end quite a bit. So in my opinion, I would feel that extended mode would kind of be obviously the best option for running this home theater if you're doing it in a home theater. And even if you listen to music that has some low end, extended mode isn't going to be bad. It still has plenty of output in the higher frequencies to support your music, and then it has a lot more output in the lower frequencies to support music with lower frequencies and movies. This is just a single subwoofer, so let's have a look at what it looks like with both of these subwoofers together. So you can tell right away, I ran this in standard mode. I didn't want to run both subwoofers in all 3 modes as well, because you kind of saw the frequency response with just the one subwoofer. Basically what you're going to see with 2 subwoofers is probably just a little bit of a flatter response and then more output across the frequency range. So that's really what I wanted to show when running both subwoofers together. So this top line has compression, this brown line has compression, but I think the blue line below it looks pretty good. So we'll keep that as our max output. So here at 20 Hertz, I think the max we saw before was 113 dB on standard mode. Well, now we're at 119, so we're getting 6 dB increase there. And at 32 Hertz, we're at 117, which I think is pretty close. 32 Hertz here was 115. So we're still getting a 2 dB increase at 32 Hertz. But as you can see, the line is a little bit flatter. You're getting smoother response, even though, again, there's no room calibration. I made no effort to flatten this line out. It's just the difference between one subwoofer and 2. But as you can see, with 2 of these subwoofers, you're getting almost 120 dB output at 20 Hertz. And if you don't mind some compression, you're getting above that. So if you do incorporate the lines that have compression, because yes, they are compressing, but you're still getting more output, you're pushing 122 dB at these peaks.
So as you guys can see, these PB17s are no slouch. They really are a beast underneath that sophisticated premium looking exterior. They are putting out some crazy numbers when it comes to max SPL. In my personal opinion, I would just leave them in extended mode. It does give you a nice balance of extension as well as max SPL numbers. So if you are looking for a subwoofer that has sophisticated premium looks, but it's able to become a beast when you want it to, the PB17 is definitely a subwoofer that you should have on your list. As I showed you with those SPL numbers, it is beastly when it comes to the output, but at the same time, it looks pretty well doing it. I have dropped links to these subwoofers down in the description below if you'd like to see more detailed specs, or if you'd like to purchase them. Please do consider using my links if you are considering purchasing these subwoofers. It doesn't cost you guys anything extra, but it really does help out the channel, and it makes it so that I can give you guys these reviews and show you guys the numbers of these subwoofers and give you the information that you need before you make that purchase. So I really do appreciate when you use those links. Remember to enjoy your systems. I'll see you on the next one. Cheers.